just equal. Black, by the way, cannot get away with knight e4 followed by knight takes f2. This would be bad. For instance, knight e4, rook d5, knight f2, rook f1, knight g4, knight takes e5, and here white has a pretty substantial advantage. So this ought to be avoided here by black. Okay, so back to the game. That, as I said, was really white's one big opportunity. In the game, he played queen to a3, and here Bronstein really takes over. So he plays bishop to c6. Okay, puts the bishop on a very good diagonal. Now, you might wonder, well, why not bishop to f5, putting it on an even better diagonal? Well, it looks like just knight takes e5, and there's not really any way for black to take advantage of the pressure on the b1 h7 diagonal. So Bronstein first improves the bishop in a different way and keeps the white pieces somewhat immobilized. Well, here white should have been modest and played knight to e1. If he had done this, it would have been a bit worse, but it would have maintained, it would have stayed a game. It would have been a positional battle where black certainly has the better chances, but there's no immediate worry for white. Well, instead, though, he didn't see any problem with bishop takes e5, and so he grabbed it. Okay, black castled, and while there's no immediate threat that black has at this point, white's position is kind of precarious. So he can't play king to b1 because then bishop e4 check, and if king a1, knight c2 would win on the spot. The knight on b4 is just great no matter what, and it ties the queen down. So what is white to do about the a pawn? That's a worry as well. Moves like knight to g4 might be coming. Bishop takes f3. You always got to keep an eye out for that to make sure that doesn't do anything too serious. So white decided that rather than worry about knight to g4 and bishop f3 ideas, he would just take on f6. So queen f6, and now rook to d2. And it looks like it's pretty comfortable for white. You know, his king could be on a better square, that's true, but he simply got to double rooks, and then maybe play knight to e1 to swap off the bishops. And if nothing has happened in the meantime, you know, it's just going to be a pawn up. Okay, he doesn't have to worry about the f2 pawn in that variation. But still, what is black going to do? So white's plan is pretty simple and straightforward. What's the counter? Well, here Bronstein thought for a while and found a really deep, powerful, and very original idea. One of the great things about Bronstein's chess is that it's, again, just exceptionally original. I mean, you'll find just remarkable tactical ideas, but remarkable maneuvers too. I mean, not just, you know, some ingenious tactical sequence that leads to mate, but throughout his games, I mean, he was just very, very creative. You know, loved to sacrifice, but he could defend, he could do everything. So, again, I think that's part of the joy of looking at his games. Well, and here again we have a case in point. Bronstein finds just a really remarkable way to proceed. Now, speaking of that, well, what should black do? I mean, the bishop looks really good. The knight is clearly excellently posted on b4. The queen looks very active on f6, and it's not really obvious where she would be any better. So that just leaves the rooks. And so you might think, well, rook f to e8 or something like that, and maybe double on the e file, or maybe if you're feeling creative, you might come up with rook a6 and rook b6, trying to put a little pressure on b2. But it's kind of hard to see exactly how black really does anything concrete here. Well, Bronstein found an answer. And he starts with the move bishop to e4. Now, this is it looks like a good move. I mean, it puts the bishop on a square where it's even more powerful than it was before. So it's covering two crucial diagonals. So that's great. But after rook h to d1, it's still not really immediately evident what the bishop can do on e4, what black can do with that bishop, or with the rest of his army for that matter. So it still looks as if black is kind of searching for play rather than really having something good right now. Well, this, I would say, is the star move, but it's really just part of the idea that began with bishop to e4. But it's still, it's the kind of thing where the strength of the move is obvious once you see it, or once you see it and reflect on it. But to find it in the first place is what's really difficult, and that's why Bronstein was just such an elite player for so many years. The move he came up with was h6. All right, you probably want your money back after that. h6, what does this do? Was Black worried about the back rank somehow? Was he worried about a knight going to g5? No, he wasn't. And in fact, his opponent might not have seen the idea either just yet. Well, here Veresov played bishop to h3, so he's aiming to unpin the knight and just get on with his own positive plans. But now, here comes the big point. And after this, it's obvious what Bronstein is up to. He plays bishop to h7. And now, all of a sudden, we can see what's going on. Black's idea is to play queen g6 and queen to b1 mate. Just like that. And it's not at all easy to meet this. First of all, if you play b3 here, so you could play king to b2, well, the problem with that is that the queen was, in fact, doing something very good on f6. There's mate in 1. And if you don't like mate in 1, you could play queen c3 and give mate in 2. Well, so what else can white do? If he plays knight h4, well, just g5 and then queen g6. So that's no solution worth speaking of. Well, sorry about that. In the game, white played rook to d7. And now the idea is that on queen to g6, he can maybe run away with king to d2. So that's the point. Or he could play knight to d4, another idea. Well, Bronstein found a good way of meeting this move as well. You might want to try to find it for yourself. It's another subtle move, but it's very powerful. The move is rook f to e8. And if you said rook a to e8, that works too. But rook f to e8 seems a little more logical since the other rook keeps the a5 pawn protected. Anyhow, the most basic point is to play rook takes e2 and then have mate on the back rank with queen g6. Or, again, just to give check on c2. That will be devastating as well. So that's the most straightforward idea. And if white defends by putting a rook on d2, well, that's no good for the reason we already know. Queen g6 and then queen to b1 is mate. Okay, so no help there. What else can he do? He could try knight to d4, but then just c5. And if the knight moves, then rook e2 or queen g6 once again. Well, rook e2. Okay, so that doesn't help. In the game, Veresov played king to d2. And in fact, this really makes a lot of sense because now the pawn is protected and the king is ready to run. So, he doesn't have to worry about mate on b1 or c2. However, there are other problems. And now Bronstein switches gears once again and plays bishop to f5, forking, you might say, the rook and the bishop. Now, it's kind of funny for a bishop to fork a bishop because the other bishop can just take it. But the problem is that after bishop f5, queen f5, the rook is under attack. Well, if you play king to e1, well, okay, not only is the rook under attack, but queen c2 check followed by queen takes e2 mate is an even bigger threat. So you might think, well, king e1, and now the rook protects this, and queen c2 is in check. Unfortunately, for white anyway, there's knight to c2 check. So that does not work either. All right, so no happiness there. But what else can he do? Again, rook to d4, queen c2, and queen e2 is mate. The best, I suppose, and it's really in a Pickwickian sense of best, is rook to d3, but then black takes on d3. And it's just a rook for nothing. If pawn takes, then queen takes, knight that is. And if queen takes knight, then rook a to d8 wins the queen. So nothing's good here for white at all. Okay, back here after bishop to f5. Veresov decided instead to play queen c3, but this is just giving up. Bronstein just took on h3, queen f6, g takes f6, and down a piece for only one pawn and really no compensation worth speaking of. White gave up at this point. One problem is that he might be losing even more material if he tries rook takes c7. It looks to me like rook to d8 wins even more. If king to e1, then, well, white saves his rook, but only by virtue of getting mated straight away. And if he goes in the other direction with king to c1, then knight a2 check, king to c2, bishop f5 check, and the king has to leave the rook, and rook takes d1 ensues. So understandably then, even though it's only after 22 moves, Veresov resigned. So that's it for the game. I wonder if Bronstein was especially motivated. He annotates the game in The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and at the end he says that Veresov was very anti-Semitic. So Bronstein, being a Jew, was perhaps especially motivated. Frankly, I say good for him. So that's how the game ended, with a very decisive victory. Okay, so as I said, that'll do it. Really a spectacular game by Bronstein, but again, the spectacularness was in this deep concept with bishop e4, h6, bishop h7. Very, very easy to miss an idea like that. And even the engine doesn't spot it right away, but when you plug it in, it likes it. So that makes it all the more impressive to my mind. It's correct, and it's hard work for the computer to find this. So bravo to Bronstein. All right, next time we'll have another one of his games. Until then, this is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos signing off for ChessLecture.com. Bye-bye.